StewartHaas Racing could be selling up to 2 charters by the end of 2024, and Junior Motorsports might be one of the teams buying one of those charters. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at some paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple of days. Let's go and just jump straight into it. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Grant Enfinger's 2024 Bobby Gill tribute scheme that we're going to see later this evening. It's a really good tribute scheme, in my opinion. Grant County Mutual sponsor this weekend. I think it looks really solid. Looking forward to seeing the racetrack tonight at Martinsville. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2024 Mobile 150th anniversary scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Martinsville. I love the gold on. I think Toyota did a little better job on theirs, but I still think this looks pretty solid. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cam Waters' 2024 tradie scheme that we're going to see later this evening at Martinsville. I like this paint scheme a lot. Looks very similar to some of the schemes he has in supercars. I think it looks really incredible. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Martinsville. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brett Holmes' 2024 Best Value Carrier scheme that we're going to see in 10 Truck Series races in 2024. This scheme's alright in my opinion. I like that it'll be a new sponsor coming in. It's decent in my opinion. Hopefully Brett Holmes can have a good run with the scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis' 2024 Sweetwater Construction Corp scheme that we're going to see in a few races in 2024. Scheme's alright in my opinion. I think it's one of my least favorite Alpha Prime schemes. I still think it looks solid, but it's not my favorite Alpha Prime scheme. Hopefully, though, he can have a good run with the scheme this weekend. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chandler Smith's 2024 Wheeler scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Martinsville. I like the green on it. I like the number where it's at. I think it looks really solid. And hopefully Chandler Smith can have a solid and good performance with this paint scheme this weekend at Martinsville. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Martinsville purse money. Every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race for the weekend, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $7,669,028. For the Xfinity race, it's $1,507,074. And for the Truck Series, it's $746,572. That's some decent purse money for this weekend, obviously, with Martinsville being pretty close to the racetrack to North Carolina. Not surprised to see a little bit of an increase, and it's not as much travel for some of these teams. It is some decent purse money. Hopefully we'll see some benefit from that, but it is some decent purse money for this weekend at Martinsville. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Team Penske. As Team Penske put out a tweet on Wednesday confirming that they will make their 6,000th race start at Martinsville, or 6,000th race start across all motorsports this weekend at Martinsville. Team Penske's had a lot of success in motorsports and Formula 1. They've won some races, I believe, in there. They've won a lot of IndyCar championships. They've won multiple Cup Series championships. And now you look at what Team Penske's been able to accomplish over the years. Multiple Daytona 500 wins. They won the Indy 500 last year. They've won nearly 20 Indy 500s. And they have a chance and opportunity in their 6,000th start to potentially pick up the win. While you got Hendrick going for their 40th anniversary win, you've got Team Penske looking for their win in the 6,000th start. I think it's a pretty incredible accomplishment for Team Penske, and nonetheless, congratulations to them on making their 6,000th start as an organization. I think it's a pretty awesome and incredible accomplishment overall, to be honest. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about North Wilkesboro. As it was announced yesterday that North Wilkesboro has officially announced single-day tickets. They have been selling full package tickets for the whole entire weekend. They've been costing around $300 to $400 for some of these packages, which is why ticket sales have not been great. But now with the All-Star race only being about a month away, they're starting to finally sell single-day tickets. Now, I don't know how expensive those tickets are going to be, but I'm glad they're finally going ahead and selling them, considering the fact that we've been kind of waiting because they've been having issues getting people to come out to the race. I know Save the Speedway on Twitter kind of stated that they've been having issues with that, and now it looks like they're finally selling single-day tickets. I think it's good. Glad to see they're finally getting on it and selling those single-day ticket packages. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Keith Wolf. As it was announced yesterday that Keith Wolf will begin crew chiefing for Ryan Ellis this weekend at Martinsville. Throughout this year so far, Mike Hillman Sr. had been the crew chief for Ryan Ellis, and they've had some decent performances this year. But the reason Mike Hillman is no longer the crew chief is because I think Mike Hillman has moved on. I'm not sure what he's going to be doing going forward into the future. As for Keith Wolf, Bob Pockrass has stated that Keith Wolf had worked with Ryan Ellis when he drove for BJ McLeod Motorsports back in the day a couple of years ago. So they've worked together in the past. Hopefully this can translate to Ryan Ellis having a really, really strong season the rest of the year and trying to get back into good owner's points position. The last couple weeks have been a little bit of struggle for the 43 team, so hopefully they could turn the season around relatively quickly. Nonetheless, really glad to see this, and again, I'm happy to see that he's got a new crew chief for this weekend, someone he's worked with in the past. Hopefully that could lead to a lot of success going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chad Finchum. As it was announced yesterday morning that Chad Finchum will drive his 66 for MBM Motorsports next weekend at Texas in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Chad Finchum has had a lot of starts at MBM Motorsports in the past. He's made select cup starts with that team, and he's also made select starts with that organization as well, along with teams like SS Greenlight Racing as well. The reason they're entering that race is because usually the purse money for Texas is really, really high, not just for the Cup Series, but also for the Xfinity Series and Truck Series. Generally, purse money is a lot higher, which is why I see a lot of these smaller organizations and teams decide to go ahead and show up. I wish the best of luck for Chad Finchum. Hope we can have a really strong run with the organization, and we'll see if we can have a solid performance next weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dexter Bean. As it was confirmed yesterday that Dexter Bean will be driving the 92 for DGM Racing this weekend at Martinsville. I believe this will be Dexter Bean's first start in the Xfinity Series in 2024 up to this point. He's made a lot of starts DGM Racing in the past, and he's been a veteran of this sport for the last decade or so. I'm not expecting much this weekend. I know the 92 car with Josh Williams did get a top 10 or top 15, I believe, the last time we were at Martinsville, but I'm not expecting that unless chaos hits tomorrow evening, which it could happen because a lot of times the Xfinity Series races can turn into chaos at that racetrack. I think it's good to see him get a chance and opportunity. I think Dexter's got some talent. I really hope he can definitely make the best of it because I want to see him have a solid and a really, really strong performance. Hopefully he can make the best of it tomorrow at Martinsville with a really strong and good performance. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Gase. As we've been kind of wondering what penalties were going to be coming out for Joey Gase after what happened at Richmond. Well, it was confirmed on Wednesday morning that Joey Gase has been fined $5,000 for his actions at Richmond Raceway. For those watching the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, Joey Gase got dumped by Dawson Cram going into turn number 1. He backed it in the outside wall, pulled the sheet metal off of his car, and threw it at Dawson Cram. Now, I don't know exactly if it was the throw that got him in trouble or if it was him walking across the racetrack, because I don't think they stated that was the reason he got penalized, but my best guess is the reason that he got a fine. And $5,000 I think is justified, by the way. I wouldn't have personally not fined him, but because he walked across the racetrack, I think that's why he did, in fact, end up getting a penalty. I know people are going to say that's not why he got a penalty, but I think the big reason is because NASCAR frowns upon drivers walking across these racetracks, and they don't like that happening, which is why I think he got the fine in the first place. I think it's a fair penalty, though. I know he was tweeting out saying, does anyone have a bail bond for me so I can pay this off? I think $5,000, like I said, is very, very justified. I think it is the right decision to go ahead and only fine him $5,000. I think that's a fair penalty and a fair assessment, in my opinion. He'll probably be able to pay. It's a smaller team, too, so that's why he didn't receive as big a penalty as other organizations. Nonetheless, I think $5,000 is a pretty justifiable penalty, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Taylor Gray. Now, it was reported by Bob Pockrass and Austin Kanensky from Motorsports Wire that Taylor Gray is expected to run 5 more NASCAR Xfinity Series races in 2024. Taylor Gray last week made his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut at Richmond and honestly had a very impressive debut, finishing in 3rd place. Unfortunately, he's not eligible for the Dasher Cash, but he is going to be running the Xfinity Series race later this weekend, Saturday, as a matter of fact, which is tomorrow. Taylor Gray, I think, is a very talented driver. He's been doing really good in the Truck Series so far this year. He's had a couple, I think 3 or 4 top 5s so far this year in trucks, and is an early championship threat and contender. And ultimately, if he can do well enough in his select Xfinity Series starts this season, I think this could eventually promote him moving up to Xfinity Series full-time next year. Considering there is a chance and possibility that Chandler Smith, of how strong he's been this year, there is a chance that Chandler Smith could move up full-time to the Cup Series next year, especially with the charter talks with some of these organizations that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. Nonetheless, I'm really excited for Taylor Gray. I'm glad to see him get the chance and opportunity to make some more starts with JGR, and I think he's going to do a really good job in the 19 car going forward. I think he's going to be running a Talladega as well in a couple weeks, which is next couple weeks. I think he's going to be running at Texas potentially as well. I think Taylor Gray is going to do a really, really good job, and nonetheless, glad to see him get the chance and opportunity to drive with this team for at least 5 more races in the 2024 season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar. Now, it was reported by Nathan Brown from the Indy Star that IndyCar is deep in its negotiation table for its next media rights deal. According to Nathan Brown, there are only 2 networks that are really in the running for the next TV rights deal. It is NBC and Fox. NBC has been hosting IndyCar races since the days of back when it was called Versus before it became NBC Sports Network back in like 2009 and 2010. And they took over the full rights at the end of the 2018 season, and they took over starting in 2019. And they signed a contract extension at the end of 2021 or 22, if I'm not mistaken, which a lot of people thought that NBC was going to be losing the rights then. But there's a lot of people that are expecting at this point that is a very good chance that Fox is going to be taking over the IndyCar rights when it comes to broadcasting races. If you were to ask me my thoughts on this when it comes to it, I think Fox is probably going to win. I personally think NBC needs to take over once again and keep doing the broadcasting because I think NBC generally puts on a good role. But the problem is that we know at this point that Lee Diffey is going to be calling NASCAR Cup Series races later this year. And the fact that Lee Diffey is beginning to call Cup Series races a lot more frequently, that tells me that IndyCar is more than likely going to be leaving to go over to Fox. I don't really want it to go to Fox. We've seen the NASCAR Cup Series coverage, even though it's been a little better this year, we've seen it generally over the last half decade or so suffer with the production and with the quality as well. To me, I really hope that Fox doesn't win the bid. I hope NBC wins, but personally, I think Fox is sadly going to win this bid. As much as I don't agree with it, I do believe that Fox is sadly going to end up winning the bid, and I think NBC is going to lose. I think IndyCar is going to Fox next year, which with some of the decisions IndyCar is making recently, this would be another bad decision for IndyCar for the sport to succeed. I don't want it to happen, but I do unfortunately believe that it is going to happen where IndyCar sadly ends up going over to Fox. I'm not a big fan of it, but it sounds like, and I think that's what's going to happen next year in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sonoma Raceway. Now, if you were on social media yesterday, you saw the SRO and IMSA put out a post talking about Sonoma Raceway, where the repave looks like to be having some major issues. Now, there was a beef that came out with Marcus Smith and Denny Hamlin that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But in Turn 10 and Turn 11 and Turn number 4, the track was coming apart. And they had to cancel all on-track activity because of it. It looked paper thin to me. And for what people have said, I know Breakar mentioned this in his video, but basically the track was coming apart. And that is not a good look because this is something that needs to get figured out because this does affect the NASCAR Cup Series and the Xfinity Series as well, as I believe the Xfinity Series is going to Sonoma this year if I'm not mistaken. We're only about 2 months away, and this is something that needs to get resolved relatively soon and relatively quickly because otherwise this could lead to major problems going forward down the road. Apparently last night they did a lot of work on the track. They are being proactive instead of being not proactive. They're not just letting it cancel the event and then just waiting it out for the Cup Series. They know that this needs to get sorted out relatively quickly. To me, I'm glad to see at least being proactive in this situation. This is something that should never have been a problem to begin with. And because it looked like it was super paper thin, there's been a lot of major issues with these repays over the last couple of years, especially with like Texas, where they reconfigured the track. I thought that was a major issue. To me, I think this is a good decision, though, for them to at least postpone some of the activities from Thursday. They're hoping to have on-track activity in the not-so-distant future. Hopefully this weekend they're going to have on-track activity. Hopefully it can get resolved relatively quickly, and hopefully it can get resolved here really, really soon because I do think it's a problem that the track is coming apart. It's something that needs to be resolved. Hopefully it does, in fact, end up getting resolved before it becomes a major issue for the Cup Series because the Cup Series cars are really, really heavy, and seeing that track come apart, not good, because it looked very, very thin, and it's not a surprise with even a smaller car that it was having issues. It's a shame to see it, but honestly, I'm not surprised or shocked by it, seeing the issues with Sonoma, but they absolutely do need to get it repaved here and fixed relatively quickly. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Childress Racing. Now, NASCARson on Twitter put out a little bit of a teaser photo indicating that it looks like that the 33 RCR car looks to be coming back. And it looks like that they're going to be bringing the 33 back for a select number of races in 2024. Brett Griffin revealed about a month ago that they were planning to bring the 33 car back for a select number of races in 2024. Some had thought there might be a chance, a possibility that Brody Kosecki could get behind the wheel of the seat at some point this year, but it sounds like due to his issues with Erebus, because Erebus has a really big alliance with Childress Racing, it doesn't sound like that Brody Kosecki as of now has any starts planned for the 2024 season, at least in NASCAR, though I think that Richard would love to have Brody come over and drive the 33 car. According to what the photo shows, it looks like that Austin Hill more than likely behind the wheel of the 33 car. Now, some think it could be at Texas Motor Speedway, is where some are indicating that this car could race. We could also see this car race maybe at Talladega, considering historically the 33s ran at Talladega quite a bit in the past and has won with Clint Boyer. We've also seen the car run a select number of races. We saw Brody drive the car last year. And I do believe that this car is going to run more than a few races. Okay, I think they're planning to run around 7 or 8 races, that 33 car this year. We know they're going to run the Chicago Street Course. Brett kind of confirmed that about a month or two ago. And we are expecting more teams and drivers to show up in some other organizations to come in soon as well. But nonetheless, I think it's going to be fun to see the 33 car back. Austin Hill, there's a lot of talk about his future in NASCAR. Obviously, we don't know how much longer Austin Dillon is going to be in the 3. I would imagine once Austin Dillon does retire, they get rid of the 3 altogether, and the 33 car makes a little bit of an appearance, unless RCR, of course, does decide to go ahead and expand to a 3rd full-time entry. I think it's very possible that that could end up happening, but I don't know if it's going to happen at this particular moment. So we'll see what happens in regards to that, but nonetheless, it looks like RCR is, in fact, bringing the number 33 car back here, and I think it's really exciting to see that that 33 is going to be making a return for a select number of races in 2024. Pretty exciting stuff overall. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Denny Hamlin versus Marcus Smith. Now, I've already talked about the issues when it comes to Sonoma Raceway and the repave, but if you were on Twitter late last night, around midnight or 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, you saw that Denny Hamlin made a comment about the repave, basically calling out Marcus Smith and calling out SMI for really terrible repaves, saying that North Wilkesboro is next, and he says you've ruined a lot of racetracks. Marcus Smith, then he commented on this situation, which we'll get to him here in just a little bit about his tweets, but he then basically said that Denny Hamlin doesn't really, someone that really knows, thinks he knows what he's talking about, really doesn't know, and he would talk a lot more if you had championships. Then Denny Hamlin came back and said, what is there to need to delete? You basically have done this, and you have a track record of having terrible repays. Marcus Smith then basically continued by calling out Denny Hamlin, saying if you had a championship, you'd be listened to a lot more. And then Denny Hamlin basically said, don't ruin your father's legacy and have someone come in and take over for your team. And then I think Marcus Smith said, my father is a Hall of Famer. So basically, this beef all started because Denny Hamlin called out the repave at Sonoma. And Denny Hamlin, is my opinion, is winning this battle. And Marcus Smith, by the way, just to put this in perspective, Marcus Smith literally deleted the tweets. The tweets are all completely gone off of Twitter, which in my opinion, that is a terrible and bad look for Marcus Smith that he deleted the tweets, because it basically, we have screenshots, dude, that you got into a beef and squabble. And as much as I do respect Marcus Smith, because he's made some good decisions, there have been a lot of issues with repays and reconfigurations over the years. We go back to Bristol. They completely screwed up Bristol, and they had to add traction compound down to the bottom of the racetrack because they made the top so dominant when they grinded the track in 2012. That was a bad change. Then you had issues with Texas, which I think Marcus Smith was involved with that process, by the way. He ruined that track. In my opinion, I think Texas got completely ruined. I know Eddie Gossage was involved with that, don't get me wrong. But I think Marcus Smith was also involved with that reconfiguration and repave as well. And the Smith family has made a lot of mistakes over the years, getting rid of North Wilkes back in the day, though they did make a great decision by bringing the track back. They've made a lot of bad decisions over the years, and they've had a history of negative connotation, of major issues, and a lot of people blame the Smith family for a lot of the problems with the racetracks over the years. And personally, I think when you look at this beef, I do think Denny Hamlin won the battle. As much as people discredit Denny Hamlin and don't like Denny Hamlin the way he handles situations, I love Denny Hamlin's outspokenness. Because Denny Hamlin, in my opinion, if he wasn't, a lot of people didn't hate him, I think he would be the favored driver by a lot of fans. Because a lot of people love when drivers can be outspoken. And Denny Hamlin is one of those drivers that is always absolutely outspoken in regards to these situations. I think Denny Hamlin's in the right here personally, though. I think he's right about the issues. He's not wrong about it. I think him calling out Marcus Smith was funny. I never expected Denny Hamlin and Marcus Smith were going to get into a beef in the middle of the night, but here we are. They got into a beef. They got into a confrontation on Twitter. I'm not shocked by it, to be honest, that there was a beef and confrontation between both of them, considering the fact that they've had issues in the past. Nonetheless, not really shocked or really surprised about it overall, to be honest, to see that both of them got into a beef and a confrontation on Twitter. Again, we'll see what happens going forward and see if this could lead to issues for Denny Hamlin in the not-so-distant future, or even Marcus Smith going forward. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Gaulding. Now, it was reported around Wednesday in the middle afternoon that Greg Gaulding was arrested on misdemeanor domestic violence charges. Now, he was released, I believe, later that evening, a couple hours after he was released. But according to NASCAR, Greg Gaulding has been indefinitely suspended due to this situation coming up, because he did report these charges that came up on Tuesday, and NASCAR does look at these situations, and they do go ahead and suspend. Now, we do need to make this very, very clear. There is always innocent until proven guilty in every situation. We don't know all the facts of the situation. We know he was arrested, but sometimes we have drivers that are arrested. But it seems like every year we always have these issues come up where someone gets arrested. Chris Hacker got arrested last year. A couple other drivers have been arrested over recent years and recent seasons, like Brian France, who basically lost his career because of the DUI. And now you've got Greg Gaulding getting in trouble for domestic violence charges. Not a great look on Greg Gaulding's end if he did, in fact, do what is being said. But again, there's always that saying of innocent until proven guilty. Do I believe it could have happened? Yeah, it definitely could have absolutely happened. But I'm not coming on record saying that it did happen. I'm just saying that he was arrested for it. It's really disappointing to see this still. Greg Gaulding did not have a ride going into this year and season. And I think having this on his conscience now, or having this come up, I think that is unfortunately and sadly going to hurt his career as a race car driver. I really hope whatever it is, I hope he can get the help he needs, and hopefully we can see him back at the racetrack really, really soon if things can be resolved. It's disappointing to see this because, like I said, it always seems to come up at least once a year where someone gets arrested. There's been so many mugshots now over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, which is absolutely wild and crazy. But to me, I think it is disappointing to see. But again, hopefully he can get the help that he needs. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about RFK Racing. Now, over the course of the last couple weeks and months, there's been a lot of chatter surrounding RFK Racing and them potentially expanding to other forms of racing and also potentially in the Cup Series as well. And according to TobyChristie.com, which they put out a really good article talking about eyeing expansion during media weeks that were available this week, basically, Brad Keselowski is definitely eyeing potential expansion, but there are some things that could hurt them potentially expanding. One of those things is the charter agreement, but Brad Keselowski did say in the article that they are expecting that it is going to get finalized by the time we get to the 2025 Daytona 500. But we don't know what the value of the charters are going to be once we do get the charter agreement officially finalized. Brad Keselowski is right, by the way. We don't know what the value of the charters are going to be, and I do expect that that value is going to go down in the next couple months. They may not be worth $40 million, or they're going to stagnate around 40, and maybe that value is going to drop from like $40 million down to like $30 million, maybe down to $20 million. But let's talk about RFK and potential expansion. We know that there's multiple organizations that are looking to expand that we're going to talk about later in this episode. But they've been wanting to expand to other forms as well, one of those being IMSA. We talked about this on the channel a couple weeks ago, but multiple representatives from RFK Racing were spotted at Sebring International Speedway on Wednesday and Thursday. They were spotted. looking to potentially get into IMSA. It is no secret that Brad Keselowski wants to bring Roush back to IMSA. They had a lot of success in IMSA back in the day. They were extremely quick there. They won, I think, some races at Daytona, especially for the Rolex 24, and they had a ton and a lot of success, and they're able to go out there and perform extremely well in IMSA. Drivers like Mark Martin won some races there. Robbie Gordon drove for Roush and won. Calvin Fish drove, and they had a lot of success. But Brad is also stating that the first goal is trying to get that Stage 60 car that we saw debut at Daytona potentially as a full-time entry as early as 2025. Now, obviously, they're going to need a charter, but who could be some potential possible candidates if they are to expand into the Cup Series? Well, you have Justin Haley. They can move Justin Haley from Brisco Racing. What they could do is they could take a charter from Brisco Racing, perhaps that Justin Haley's driving, maybe that 15 charter or the 51 charter, and move it over to RFK Racing, considering that Rick Ware and RFK do have an alliance, and it's no secret that Brad Keselowski wants to bring Justin Haley in to the fold on a full-time basis in the not-so-distant future. That could be a possibility. But if not him, what other candidates could you get? Maybe Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst is someone who's moving up through the ranks really, really quickly. Well, not quickly, but he's been doing a really solid job in Xfinity recently. He's made some Select Cup starts, and I think he's done a pretty good job in the Select Cup races that he's ran. And he's improved and matured and gotten a lot better as a race car driver in recent seasons. What about Hailie Deegan, perhaps? I know that's kind of a crazy, bold prediction, but she could be someone to watch where they can get a possibility here, considering Ford really likes her. And as much, I don't know if she's ready in any shape or form to move up the Cup. She brings sponsorship and funding, so maybe that could be a possibility. What about Matt DiBenedetto? Matty D's part of the Ford camp now. I know that there's a chance that he could have made some starts at Call Racing a Cup this year. He could be a possibility. You've got Cole Custer, that's a possibility. You've got a couple other drivers in lower series. You could have Harrison Burton if Harrison Burton does get let go. And what about even Chase Briscoe if Chase Briscoe doesn't return to StewartHaas Racing? That could be a potential possibility and a shout as well. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And they're looking to maybe even open up an Xfinity program in the future, even though we all thought they were going to be back in Xfinity this year. Obviously, that was, say, 60 car, because I think a lot of us want to see him back in Xfinity. Brad said it last year, they're a little interested, but obviously their goal is to get a Cup Series program opened up once again, and bring that to a third card, and of course get IMSA potentially into that series as well. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to the future of RFK Racing and whether or not they're going to expand there. But I do believe that RFK Racing will be an organization that is looking to expand and add charters going into the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about StewartHaas Racing. Now, if you've been paying attention over the course of this last week, there's been a lot of talk and conversations over the last few weeks circulating about StewartHaas Racing and whether or not they are going to switch manufacturers potentially at the end of this year going into 2025, or if they are going to downsize their program. There's been a lot of talk about this over the course of the last 2 weeks. And it was reported by Adam Stern earlier this week that StewartHaas Racing could be selling at least 1 to 2 charters in 2024 and losing one of their 2 drivers at the end of the 2024 season. Now, we're going to talk about the organizations that could be in the running for those charters in just a second. This does not shock me, though, because we know right now that StewartHaas Racing has still not signed their contract with Ford for the 2025 season, their Tier 1 deal. We know that Front Row is taking over their place as a third team. And if they do lose their Tier 1 support, they are going to have to downsize. There is no organization in the Cup Series that's not part of a Tier 1 group at the moment that has 4 teams. Spire Motorsports is the closest thing we have to that right now, and they've been struggling a little bit, though they've had some decent pace and speed. They're a 3-car team, and they struggle a little bit. There is no way that StewartHaas Racing is going to be able to keep up. If they become a 4-car team once again next year, they're going to have to downsize if they're not part of Tier 1 support. Now, obviously, there's a lot of talk they could switch manufacturers. Some are speculating they could go to Chevy next year, which they've had a partnership with Chevrolet in the past. They had a lot of success with Chevrolet, so they won both their championships there. So certainly they could go to Chevrolet as well. But they could also stay with Ford for another year, and then potentially if, let's say, Honda comes into the sport in 2026, that could certainly be a possibility. There's a lot of talk that Honda is going to be leaving IndyCar potentially, and they might focus on their program over there in Formula One with Aston Martin, because they've got a big partnership with Aston Martin this year, but they also focus on partnering up with the NASCAR Cup Series or joining NASCAR in 2026. A lot of people think that they're going to be joining as early as 2026. They're testing some stuff from engine configurations with axle torques and whatnot. We saw Martin Truex Jr. get that for this past weekend at Richmond. You might see that going forward, especially with the future of engines and combustion engines, among other things. But let's say they don't switch and they stay with Ford. If they're going to be a Tier 1 team, if they don't get their Tier 1 support, they're going to have to downsize. Now, what drivers could be in jeopardy and what drivers could be in serious trouble? Well, you've got 4 drivers, and there's a case for all these drivers to stay and a case for all these drivers to go. First one you have is Chase Briscoe. Chase Briscoe's under contract with Ford. He's not fully under contract with StewartHaas Racing. But Chase Briscoe stated recently that this is a contract year for him with StewartHaas Racing. And it's no secret that with the reports of this coming out, Chase Briscoe could potentially be on the chopping block of leaving SHR. But if I was StewartHaas Racing, if I wanted to keep SHR being successful, I'd keep Chase Briscoe, because Chase Briscoe is a very talented and great driver. He's not like a Kevin Harvick level talent, but I think he's been the second best driver overall in the last couple seasons and been the best driver at SHR outside of Kevin Harvick. Plus, he's gotten a win for the team in the last few years, only back in 2022, and made it to the round of 8 in 2022. And so far this year, he's the highest in points for StewartHaas Racing. But again, and he also brings a little sponsorship and funding, but we'll get to him here in just a little bit. You then got Josh Berry, who's driving the 4 car. Now, I think Josh Berry's not going anywhere. I'll be honest. There's a chance he could go, but if he goes, Ronnie Childress is leaving. Let's just keep it real. Ronnie Childress and Josh Berry love working together very, very well. Then you've got Noah Gragson. I think Noah Gragson has been consistently the fastest car at StewartHaas Racing this year. He's been in the top 15, top 20 consistently, and has had top 10 speed a lot of weeks as well. I don't know if Noah Gragson goes. And then you've got Ryan Preece, which is now where we transition to talking about the drivers that could leave StewartHaas Racing at the end of the season. Ryan Preece, I think, is no doubt leaving StewartHaas Racing at the end of the year if they downsize in 1 or 2 cars. Ryan Preece does not bring a lot of sponsorship funding to the table, and Ryan Preece, in my honest opinion, while I think he is a talented driver, no doubt, he hasn't really stepped up to the plate and been the standout guy. Yes, he's about to tie for the same amount of points Noah Gragson's had, but I think he's been the weakest link at StewartHaas Racing, though I do think he's been better than Cole Custer was in that 41 car. I think Ryan Preece more than likely will go because he doesn't bring the sponsorship in funding. If they do downsize to 2 cars, Chase Briscoe, I think, more than likely will be the one to go, unfortunately. I know people are going to think that I'm wrong for saying this, because personally, if I was SHR, I keep Chase Briscoe around, right? But here's the problem. Chase Briscoe is tied with Ford. He's not tied with SHR to my understanding. And I think that he would more than likely end up leaving StewartHaas Racing at the end of the season if he's tied with Ford. Now, where could he potentially go? Well, Chase Briscoe perhaps could go to a team like the Wood Brothers. Harrison Burton has been absolutely struggling at the Wood Brothers this year. I talked about it on Monday, but basically, in the 7 races we've ran so far in 2024, Harrison Burton's only finished once inside the top 25. That is bad. He's 34 from the points. He's been struggling. And a lot of people are expecting Harrison Burton with the struggles he's had this year. They're thinking that he is going to be let go from StewartHaas Racing at the end of the season. So that is a possibility that we could see a driver like Harrison Burton let go at the end of the year. And that could be where Chase Briscoe goes. Plus, Chase Briscoe does have sponsorship and funding from Mahindra and also High Point. High Point's been more of a sponsorship for Chase Briscoe than StewartHaas Racing. So that will be the other driver I think will go. Josh Berry is loyal to Ronnie Childress. SHR likes Josh Berry. They're not getting rid of him. And Noah Gragson, he's a rookie, and he brings a little sponsorship as well. So I don't think he goes. Now, if they say a 3-car team, I think Ryan Preece goes, and I think Briscoe stays. But I personally think that they're going to downsize to a 2-car team next season in 2025. Now let's talk about the teams that could pick up the charter. It was reported by Adam Stern there are 4 teams that are in the running for this charter. You have 2311 Racing, Trackhouse Racing, Legacy Motor Club, and Junior Motorsports. Let's start out with Trackhouse Racing. Trackhouse Racing is desperately going to need to expand going into 2025. They have 5 drivers that are under contract currently at the moment, but right now they only have 2 cars on the team. and they're looking to expand going into 2025. You've got Ross Chastain. He's got a long-term deal. He's no doubt staying in that one car next year. He's not going anywhere. Plus, he's been doing a really good job with Trackhouse this season. Then you have Daniel Suarez. Daniel Suarez did, to be fair, get that win at Atlanta Motor Speedway. But outside of that, Daniel Suarez has kind of been quiet. I think that's his only top 10 so far this year. And right now in the regular season standings, even with that win, he is 15th in the points. He's below drivers like Kyle Busch and Bubba Wallace in the standings currently at this particular moment. So that could be a possibility there. They're looking to expand. If he could stay there, but it's not sure if he's going to stay at Trackhouse next year. Then you got Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG has been doing an incredible job this season so far. And I think that he wants to go full-time Cup racing. He stated, I think, talking to Robbins Racing, that the plan is for him to go full-time Cup racing in 2025, potentially. So I think Shane Van Gisbergen is going to move up to Cup full-time. He's been doing a really good job in his Select Xfinity Series starts. He's 13th in the points, only 1 point below the cutoff line, and more than likely is going to go above that cutoff line this week. And I think he's going to have a chance of winning multiple races this season. So I think he's definitely moving up in 2025. And then you obviously got Zane Smith. Zane Smith's under contract with Trackhouse. He's driving for Spire, but I think they could integrate that Spire charter into a Trackhouse team. So that's the first team that can move up. I don't think Connor Zillage is moving up full-time Cup racing, but that's the thing to watch for. Then you've got 2311 Racing. 2311 Racing, I think, is one of those teams in the running for one of these charters. 2311 Racing wants to expand to 4 full-time entries. You've got, of course, Tyler Reddick in the 45 and Bubba Wallace in the 23. But you've got a third car that they've ran select starts. Kamui Kobayashi ran this year, and they're expected to have 2 more races. You can see Corey Heim jump up full-time next year. That is a big possibility. He's a reserve driver for 2311, and let's be real, I think Corey Heim's ready to move up the Cup. I know it's crazy to say, but he's been killing it in trucks. He's been the guard to beat in trucks so far this year. I think he's probably going to move up as early as next season. You then, of course, have another driver like Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith has been doing a great job in Xfinity. He's a championship favorite. He's made select starts in the Passing Cup, so he could certainly be a possibility of moving up. What about Kurt Busch potentially coming back? That could be a possibility. We know Denny Hamlin could potentially move up next year to this team in the future, like 2026, 2027, on a part-time basis. Maybe they get Carl Edwards out of retirement. What about other drivers like Sheldon Creed and Eric Almirola as potential possibilities for a third car? This is a team that I think is absolutely in the running for a charter currently at the moment. You then have Legacy. This one is very interesting to me and one I did not expect to see as in the running. I think Legacy is the least likely of these organizations to expand next year. But, to be fair, they do have a third car, and I mentioned Corey Heim for 2311. Well, Corey Heim is also a reserve driver for Legacy Motor Club. Legacy, I think, wants to make big moves. This team's been showing a lot more speed so far in the 2024 season, and I think they'd love to expand in the future to 3 full-time teams. Because I don't think Jimmy Johnson's going to be racing forever. I think Jimmy Johnson retires in the next year or so. So they certainly could expand and get a driver like Corey Heim to get behind the wheel. And then you have Junior Motorsports. I think Junior Motorsports is the third of the 4 organizations. I still think it's a little unlikely at this point, but they always continue to get mentioned as a possibility. We've heard a lot of talk about Junior Motorsports wanting to move up to the Cup Series all the way back to like 2021 for whatever. All the way back when Josh Berry won his first start in 2021 in Xfinity driving that 8 car. Junior stated that he wants to go Cup Series racing in the future. But what hurts Junior's opportunity and chance to potentially move his team up the Cup is the money. Now, I do think, like I mentioned, if that value goes down to like $20, even $30 million, that could open a door for Junior Motorsports to move up. I think Junior Motorsports being in the Cup Series next year would be really, really huge for the sport. Now, what potential candidacy teams, what drivers could they get potentially? They can move a driver like Sammy Smith up next year. Sammy Smith, while he's been okay to start this year and not absolutely amazing, Sammy Smith, I think, has a lot of talent, and he does have sponsorship and funding from Pilot Flying J and TMC. He could be a candidate for this. You've also got, of course, maybe Connor Zillage in the future. If he wants to go to Junior Motorsports as an outright role, that could be a possibility there. You've got Justin Allgaier, and even got Sam Mayer. Sam Mayer, I'm surprised that he's not made a Cup start so far at this point. I think Sam Mayer has done a solid job, and I think it would be really cool for him to get that chance and opportunity to move up to the Cup Series relatively soon. So I think that could be a thing to watch for. Do I think Junior Motorsports is 1,000% moving up? I think it's actually increased a little bit. I didn't think it was exactly 100% likely they move up, but they always get mentioned as a possibility every time you get in the charter negotiations. But if I had to rank the most likely to pick up the SHR charters, I would say Trackhouse number 1, 2311 number 2, Junior Motorsports number 3, and Legacy number 4. If you want my prediction on who gets the SHR charters, I do think it's going to be Trackhouse who at least gets one of them, and maybe 2311 and Junior Motorsports fight for that second charter. But we could see 2311 Racing get the SHR charter. Trackhouse also, though, could get one of the Kaulig charters. We know that Kaulig Racing might downsize this upcoming season. I know they've said the charters are not available, but if I'm Kaulig, I'm looking to downsize at this point. It is going to be interesting to see what happens in regards to who picks up these charters going into next season. It'll be fun to watch, and it'll be a big story to watch as the season progresses and goes on. So, that is for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my page as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you have any charters you think SHR is going to sell? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Junior Motorsports is going to go Cup racing next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later tonight on the channel, we're going to have the NASCAR Truck Series race review from Martinsville. Tomorrow morning on the channel, there's going to be a little silly season update video coming out, a silly season preview, I should say, dropping on the channel with some of the big names and drivers that could be in the running. And also, we'll see an SVG video potentially later in the evening, depending on how he performs. We'll have the Xfinity Series race review, the pole winning video for Cup, and then Sunday, we're going to have multiple videos dropping on the channel surrounding Martinsville. And then Monday, we should have a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel. Got a ton of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. Also, silly season predictions for 2025 are going to be out in the next couple of weeks. And also, you're going to see the NASCAR schedule prediction dropping sometime this month as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.